go. We are live. Welcome to the League of Women Voters at the La Crosse area's December No Lunch and Learn. I'm Mary Nugent, La Crosse League's president. While much of our focus this year has been on the election, another important event occurred, the census. Every 10 years, the people of the United States are counted, and the numbers determine the number of representatives each state has, as well as the amount of federal money allocated. Today, we're very fortunate to have Jane Claycamp, Associate County Administrator, to discuss the census at the local level, and Anne Marie McClellan, member of the Governor's People's Maps Task Force, to discuss the census's impact on redistricting and how that process may occur in Wisconsin. In addition, Ellen France will give us an update on current judicial happenings, and Robin Schmidt will show you how to access the membership page on the website. On a personal note, I would like to thank all of you for supporting the League's work. This year, we have set records in membership, volunteer hours, number of members engaged, and community outreach. With your help, we became part of the Vote 411 system to provide local candidate information for the public. We learned to Zoom, and so many more people have been able to participate in our lunch and learns, committee meetings, and book club. Our website was totally revamped using the Club Express management system, which allows for a better viewer experience and also ways to coordinate our messages from state and national. Whether you tweet, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or Google, you will now be able to follow our league. Our voter services team rose to the challenge of a presidential election and coordinated with numerous other community entities to reach voters and potential voters through media, outdoor events, car parades, door hangers, and numerous other activities. I'm sure you saw our billboards urging people to vote, a project we did in coordination with the county. Our Fair Maps people again helped procure referendums in Crawford, Trempealeau, and Monroe counties. Our census people coordinated with the county to get the message out to the college students. And of course, our program people have once again produced an outstanding information year. And on top of all of that, we had not one, but two centennial celebrations for the League and the 19th Amendment. We are truly awesome. But we're not done yet. We have the possibility of 3 new projects for which we are looking for interested people to help with. One is an oral history project of lifetime members. The second is a study of ranked choice voting. And the third is working with the River Alliance of Wisconsin on clean water referendums. If you are interested in being a part of any of these new projects or joining any of our standing committees, please contact us through our website. Now, without further ado, let's get on to our outstanding program today. As always, this webinar will be recorded and available on our website and on our YouTube channel. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. I'd now like to introduce you to Robin Schmidt, our Vice President, for some how-to explanations and also a brief how-to for signing in as a member on the website. There you go, Robin.
Thanks, Mary. I'm usually behind the camera, not in front of it, so I apologize if I don't work this 100% correctly, but I think I'll start by just explaining that, as usual for our Lunch and Learns, if you have questions for any of the speakers at the conclusion of their talk, I will be monitoring the question and answer icon at the bottom of your screen. So if you have a question, click the little Q&A and type in your question, and we'll get those to each speaker at the end of their presentation. And I probably won't be monitoring the chat box. It's kind of tricky to try to keep monitoring both. So we just ask that you please use the question and answer icon for submitting questions. So that's how the Q&As will run. I did want to give a quick overview for members on how to log into Club Express. And for that, I am going to do a screen share. And this is where it gets a little tricky, where I get a little nervous. So let's try this. Basically, before you log on to Club Express for the first time, you should go check your emails, and you should have gotten an email from the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area. And in this email, you will have information on, hold on just a second, that will identify your username and a temporary password. So you'll want to have that on hand when you log in for the first time. And then when you have that ready, if you go to our main website, you'll see the button on the top that says Member Login. So if you click on that Member Login, it will take you to a screen where you will, it'll put your username in there, but you'll need to create your own password, sorry. So you keep the username, you create your own password. And if you notice at the very top, I made a member called Carrie Chapman Cat, but I can't spell very well, so I apologize for that. Anyway, when you log in, your name will appear on the top right-hand side of the screen. And the reason that we want you to make sure that you log in is our membership directory is accessible to members, and we want to make sure that you establish what information you want available in the membership directory. So in order to do that, I am going to show you what it's like when I log in and how you can access your control panel. So I think that, oh, shoot, here we go. I think that this should get you to my website screen, and you can see my name here. When I scroll over my name, you will see, you will see the profile appear. So when I click on the profile.
Excuse me, Robin?
Yes.
It didn't change. Your screen didn't change.
All right, hold on one second. I'm going to stop share and I'll just do a new share. Did that work?
Yes.
Okay, so what I did was I scrolled over my name and I highlighted the profile button that shows up when you highlight your name. And that took me to this screen here. So you can see it says member profile. Under personal information, it says standard member directory. If you click on that, the very first under general info is a tab that says visibility. And here's where you can select what information you would like to have included in the membership directory. And you have a lot of options. If you don't want to be listed in the directory, you have that option. If you only want to have your name and state and not your bio or contact information, you can go ahead and read all these different options. But I just wanted to make sure that people were aware that they have the ability to decide for themselves what information they would want. Because I didn't put in the system, I don't even know what some of these things are. I'm old, so I didn't do that, but I did upload a photo. So that photo would appear in the membership directory. And I believe that we're going to also add a section here that allows you to identify interests. So you can also type in any interest that you have that might help us, if opportunities come up where we might be able to reach you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. And I'm going to go to the next section of our program, which is spotlighting Ellen, so that Ellen can unmute, and then she can give an update on what the courts have been up to. So I hope that helped explain Club Express a little bit, and welcome, Ellen. Thanks.
Okay, so I luckily found an article that kind of summarized all of the different post-election recount lawsuits in Wisconsin. Now, just to try to do it briefly here, there were actually 3 actions filed in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and these are petitions to ask the court to take original jurisdiction. So there's no trial court or fact-finding court involved, at least not at the beginning, if the Supreme Court takes jurisdiction under an original action. So one was filed by Wisconsin Voters Alliance, a conservative group out of Kewaunee County. And then one was filed by, it was Donald J. Trump versus Anthony Evers, our governor. And a third one where the Trump and or his campaign actually sued the president-elect and vice president-elect, Biden and Harris. And they had different arguments that they made. The one, Trump versus our governor, the remedy they wanted was to throw out about 220,000 votes. The Trump sues Biden and Harris. The remedy there was to set aside a smaller number of absentee ballots out of Dane and Milwaukee counties, saying that the procedures the right procedures were not followed. All 3 of those cases in the Wisconsin Supreme Court have essentially been dismissed at this time. The court said, we're not going to take original jurisdiction. And a couple of them have now been filed in circuit courts, the trial court in Wisconsin. So their Supreme says, we're not taking it, but they then filed in lower court so that they can theoretically come up through the system. So it is always possible that it will come up through the system and get back before our Wisconsin Supreme Court, although the timing is problematic on any of these. You've probably read how this court split the 3 more liberal justices and Hagedorn, who has been an interesting justice because sometimes he sides, he's kind of a middle of the roader person, kind of sides with the more liberal faction and sometimes not. But he sided with them in the decision not to take jurisdiction in any of these 3 actions. So the case is sent in circuit court, and one of the judges who has this is Smanik. I may be mispronouncing his name, in Racine County, a Racine County Reserve Judge. And there are hearings set on Friday afternoon, this Friday, December 10th. And I say they're set at that time, although there are 2 courts also filed in federal district courts in Wisconsin. One by the Trump campaign, and one by infamous Sidney Powell that you've read about. I'm guessing the lawsuit that added Derek Van Orden as a plaintiff, to which he objected. So those are the 2 The Powell lawsuit includes a number of factual errors and sought footage of ballot counting out of Milwaukee, although they named the wrong center in the petition. And the other one filed by the Trump campaign is against the Wisconsin Elections Commission, 5 of 6 of the members, as well as some other officials in the largest and most Democratic cities, i.e. Madison and Milwaukee. And that lawsuit claims that despite long-running Wisconsin Elections Commission guidance, the officials in just these Democratic cities, only deals with Madison, Milwaukee, broke the law and tainted more than 50,000 ballots. And the relief requested is to invalidate the results of the vote and have the legislature allocate Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes. In other words, that's the remedy. Make our legislators say, oh, we can't be electors for the winner, Biden, we have to be electors for Trump. So the hearing in the federal lawsuit is also set for December 10th. So the state one will take place if there's time. If it takes too long on December 10th. In federal court, then they'll have to reschedule because they won't have time to get to the one in the state court. So, watch for December 10th. There also is another date this week that has perhaps some interest. I don't know whether it's going to effectively make any change, but on December 11th, the Republicans in our state assembly will hold a hearing on an investigation into election results. And the writer I'm reading says, including testimony echoing many of the conspiracy theories that we're hearing from across the country. And if you haven't caught it, there have been a few Republicans, state office holders, who have suggested that although we have one of the more restrictive voter ID laws and effective gerrymandering any place in the country, they may be looking to change things or reform the state election law. So probably not in a good way for those of us who are members of the League of Women Voters, but so watch what might happen on the 10th if something comes out of those court actions that soon. And if you're interested, watch what the Assembly Republicans do on Friday. It never ends. That's all I have.
Ellen, I have a question. What would happen if this does not get resolved by the time that, by the inauguration?
Well, I think it becomes even more of a done deal as you move down the calendar in December. There's something, and I apologize, don't think I can describe this very well, but there's I think in Congress, a drop dead date of today. And the certifications and the electoral, I think that, if I remember correctly, is the 14th. If I say a date wrong, you could feel free to correct me. I didn't pull up my chart. But once the electors across the country say, this is where we are, it seems to be very difficult for courts to say, whoops. And the other problem is, of course, if they would say, whoops, in Wisconsin, that's only 10 electoral votes. It isn't going to change the election. You would have to have enough of these activities, whether it's through court action or trying to persuade the Georgia governor to have his people switch and be electors for Trump, you'd have to do that in enough states to actually change the result. And I just can't see a court deciding that we're going to throw out all or substantially all of a number of votes. You know, what the choices of the people made. I mean, the errors, if there are errors, are not the kind of whole-scale fraud and conspiracy theories that have been at least put forward, but without, as far as I know, any evidence at all at this point. So I think the more you travel day by day, the less likely it's going to be that anything is going to be possible. And frankly, I don't think that there's going to be any result in Wisconsin either that changes it up. Okay.
Ellen, I don't have any questions here, so if you want to go ahead and introduce Jane, that'd be awesome.
Forgot. I was already going to mute. So many of our members know Jane. She's been a long-term member of the League of Women Voters in La Crosse. She's a past president. I think you did 2 cycles of her, remember correctly.
Maybe.
Yeah. So she also has been employed by La Crosse County for 30 years in a variety of positions. In the last 6 years, she's been the Associate County Administrator for La Crosse County. Jane was also part of the, I don't know whether you'd call it the organizing group or the group that coordinated activities in La Crosse County for the census that took place earlier in 2020. So she's here to talk to us about where we are with the census, what it means. Take it away, Jane.
Hi, everybody. I know that everyone feels like their world is super small, and I actually have the good fortune of still being able to go to work every day. So I get to see people, which for me is nice. And I'm not the world's biggest extrovert, but it's very nice. But today I got to talk to 5 new people that I haven't talked to. And it's like, woo, someday everything will get back to normal-ish. Normal-ish is what I like to say. So the census is one of those things that I probably only paid enough attention to it to answer my census in the past, but this year I got did a lot of educating myself and trying to figure out how to work with others to promote the census. So now I could talk about it for a long time, but I promise I won't talk that long with you. So I'm just making sure I choose my correct screen so that you are seeing the correct screen. I think, oh, nope, this is it. Too many things open as always. So hopefully you see a League of Women Voters header, and that's it. So now I just have to make sure that so now are you seeing something that says Census History? Awesome, okay. So I just find stuff like this to be kind of interesting in that the first census was in 1790, and the entire population of the country was about 4 million people, which Los Angeles has a little over 4 million people, and Chicago has about 2.6 million people. So when you think of that, you know, eastern coast of the country was getting counted, and then of course that it was on parchment paper or animal skins. I love stuff like that. Anybody who's, you know, a vegan, I'm sorry I said that, but I just find it to be kind of interesting. And then this year, the estimated count is going to be about 330 million people. And this is the first year that the census was done online, which you would think would have increased the number of self-reporters, but it doesn't look like it did very much. But people will get used to it and it will become more common to be able to do that. But I think that was a really good decision of the census to make, that people could respond online. And I think that more people will just respond that way in the future. So what's been done already? This might not be the easiest slide to see, but census work starts I suppose probably the census for 2030 has already started, or will start as soon as everything is finished with this one. But office is open. And one thing I didn't really realize until this year was one of the things that has to be done is all addresses have to be updated. So you think of all the building that occurs, all the new houses, all of those addresses have to be added in and accounted for accurately. And just so there's lots of steps that are even done before we get to the census work. And Census Day was officially April 1st of this year, which I also thought was maybe not the best day to choose for Census Day, being it's April 1st, but being as 2020 has been a weird year, I guess it doesn't really matter one way or the other when it happened. But there were a number of complete count committees who got together. So the city of La Crosse had a complete count committee. I know that Giashia had a complete count committee. The county had a complete count committee, and try to pull different organizations and people into those teams to try and ensure that everybody gets counted. And so we had a number of people that showed up for hours. So it's really been a very neat endeavor to be part of. And I remember at the Hmong New Year last year, so in 2019, one of the things that the Giashia group did was they had people take pictures saying that they were going to participate in the census, and then that got posted and used with the Hmong population. So that was a pretty interesting thing to be part of. So April 1st was Census Day. Obviously, there have been lots of different things that have happened since then. Probably the census was confusing this year because when April 1st is the day that people are counted, but by that time, some colleges and universities had sent students home because of COVID. The students should have been counted in La Crosse. I'm not sure. We're going to see how that count ended up. But also they count people in things like jails and prisons and nursing homes. So there's lots of ways that they talk about getting the information from congregate settings. And as late as September, I was still talking to someone from the census about how to count people that were homeless. And at that time, there were a number of people that are homeless that were staying in the Econo Lodge on the north side. So that would have been an easier way to count people. By September or October 15th, excuse me, that was when the count was officially ended. It's estimated that about 99.9% of people had been counted. There is concern that in some areas, and I'm just going to name New Orleans, Louisiana as one of those places, there's concern that not as many people were counted because of the storms that were happening right then. And as you can imagine in New Orleans, because it's going to be probably in places where there are more people from diverse backgrounds, more people of color, the concern is that some people of color may not have been counted as they should have. So there's all kinds of concerns like that. And I'm not sure how we're ever really going to know the outcome of all of it, but certainly we'll continue to watch it and keep an eye on it. And as with so many things, there's a lot of lawsuits. I don't remember lawsuits about the census happening before, but there could have been, but this year there have been a number of them. So this is Wisconsin's response rates. You can see the browns and orangey yellow kinds of colors are the lower response rate. La Crosse was in that 63 to 68% response rate, so we did okay. And then you can see Minnesota for the last 2 or 3 that I have counted. Minnesota is always the highest in self-response, and that they had a 75% self-response rate, and Wisconsin had a 72% self-response rate. So, that's good compared to some states, but as always, we would like it to be better. So we'll keep chasing Minnesota on that to see how it goes. And you can find all of these charts that I'm showing you. If you go to the 2020 census, you can find, again, you could read about the census and watch many videos for hours at a time, as I have done over the past year, but it has some interesting information. So some people might say, well, what does the census do? We know it counts everybody in theory, but there are 6 areas that it kind of takes care of. So one is just apportionment in Congress. Where do the Congress people end up being? And I have a slide a little bit later about that. There's also redistricting, which you're going to hear about in a few minutes. It's the money to states and localities that is, again, didn't realize how much depended on the census. And I also have a slide on that in a minute to show how money is divvied up by the census. Planning. So I never thought much about how does a hospital or a clinic or Quick Trip decide where they're going to build another clinic or another Quick Trip. And it could be that they use census data to determine where the population is growing and then to build clinics. So there's different ways, different how roads are built and all of that kind of stuff. Again, emergency response or disasters is dependent on the census data. So to go back to New Orleans, in that if they have a lower census, they wouldn't get as much federal funding for a disaster if they have a higher census. And then some of you may be familiar with the American Community Survey. That's something that happens every year. It's not everyone is counted. It's a survey that goes out that helps determine, you know, what kind of jobs people have and what's the level of education and just different things like that. So the census is also used as a base for federal surveys. So it actually covered a lot more than what I realized it did, but the funding is a big part of it. So this is just an example. There are really hundreds of programs that are funded either by the census or the American Community Survey. You know, it's things like student loans, low income tax credits, adoption assistance programs, Medicaid is huge, clinics, schools, roads, hospitals, all of those things are funded in part by the census. How much money are we talking about? Almost $1 trillion is what we're talking about. So not peanuts. And you can see, probably the chart doesn't show up super good, but the George Washington University, they also do a lot of good work around the census. The medical assistance programs or Medicaid is, gosh, $361 billion. So that's a big part of how it's determined where it's shared with different areas. Again, you can go look all of this up, but it's a lot of money. Reapportionment is also something that happens with the census. So my notes say that the numbers have to be turned over to the president or Congress, or maybe both, by December 31st. And this again is, you know, the US House of Representatives, there are 435 seats. The possible gains and losses, again, we don't know this because the census isn't finalized, and those dates, depending on what you look at, hopefully it's going to be done on its regular timeline, but it might need a little longer than usual. But gains, looks like Texas might gain 3 seats, Florida might gain 2, Arizona, Colorado, Montana, North Carolina, and Oregon might all gain a seat. And the losses, that means obviously there's some states that are going to lose. Alabama, California, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and West Virginia look like they may all lose a seat. This, my understanding, could also change the electoral college map. Again, this is like the rabbit hole of the census that I could spend a lot of time on, but I think it also would change the electoral map. So there have been and are some lawsuits also around the census. There was a very early on, the current presidential administration asked that a citizenship question be asked, and the decision was that could not happen. There were many dates that were changed about when the census was going to be finished. It was October 31st, then it was September 30th, then it was October 15th, and October 15th is when it ended. And then my understanding, there's also a current lawsuit somehow at the Supreme Court that is asking, the Trump administration is asking that non-documented individuals be excluded from the census. The little bit I read about it, the Supreme Court justices were saying, well, how would you decide who those people are and how would they be excluded and how would you know that? So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that nothing happens with that, but those are the things that are still pending. All of that could, again, delay when the final numbers are done, which then delays the next speakers, which she's going to be talking about too. So all of this stuff like is a waterfall that either, you know, flow easy or not flow easy. And as this year has been, it has not flowed very easily. So that is what I have for what I wanted to share with you, and would be happy to answer any questions that I know or try to answer, or try to send you to somebody else or something else if I don't know it.
So right now I don't have any questions. If anybody has any questions, please type them in the Q&A slot and we'll get to them.
I'm actually just going to ask a question. This is Ellen. The chart that you showed that said the individual response rate, you know, from 60% to 75% in Minnesota, that is only the rate of people actually themselves doing it. But the numbers went up, right, as people were followed up?
Yep.
So isn't it something like 99% actually were counted?
Yep. Yeah, so those are the self-response rates. So if you look at the entire country, most states say that there's a 99.9% response rate. And I think Louisiana is the only state I noticed it as being just 99. I think what is sometimes concerning is that if you look at an entire state, that 99.9 looks really good, but let's say, I'm making this up because this is not what happened. Let's say that the city of Milwaukee was that point, you know, whatever that was excluded, that would be a large number of people of color that would be excluded. So when you think about 99.9%, that seems really good, but the concern is sometimes that could also be discriminatory in when people aren't counted. But yeah, there's a huge response rate. So that's the good part.
I just have one other question here. Do you know when we should hear about the ruling on, I think it's the Supreme Court lawsuit?
What I read about it, it doesn't seem like they're terribly interested in doing anything with it, but they also, I don't remember the date. It seemed like they may have given a couple of weeks from sometime last week for the Trump administration to explain how they would decide who the undocumented people are. I don't know how, again, I have no idea how they would do that. So my guess is I'm hoping, maybe this is just my hopeful nature, is that nothing's going to happen with that to slow this down even more. So we'll find out shortly. Like so many things, you got to kind of wait and see what the deal is, but hopefully nothing much will happen.
All right. Well, hey, thanks very much, Jane. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Nugent to introduce the next speaker, and really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. It was really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how it all comes out at the end. I'm very, very, very pleased to introduce Anne Marie McClellan of Menominee. Anne Marie is a commissioner on the People's Maps Commission that was set up by the governor. She is representing the 3rd Congressional District on this commission. Anne Marie is currently retired after a career in manufacturing and clinical research. She's one of the founding members of the League of Women Voters Greater Chippewa Valley chapter and is currently serving as co-president. She's also served as a poll worker, and election observer. Anne Marie is going to talk to us about redistricting. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for the introduction, Mary. And it's so nice to be here with fellow league members. We are a newer chapter, and so we kind of are looking to your chapter for a little bit of guidance. So I'm really happy to meet you all and be here. And also that little preview of Club Express was nice, because we're just moving into that same system. After the first of the year, we'll put our efforts into moving to that. So thank you all. And I am here to talk about the People's Map Commission, our purpose and impact. So let me, bear with me for 1 minute while I get my screen share here all pulled together. Okay, is that working now? Thank you. Okay, so besides being on the League of Women Voters, I am a commissioner representing our 3rd congressional district on the People's Map Commission. And there's our URL if anyone wants to learn more about the People's Map. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. Okay, wait a second here. Make sure I can advance these. Okay, so why form the People's Map Commission to begin with? And the main reason is because of gerrymandering. And if you're all league members, I'm sure you're very familiar with the concept of gerrymandering. It's when a party will intentionally draw district boundaries to gain some sort of systematic advantage. You know, one can almost look at it as a form of voter suppression because it contradicts the policy of having one person, one vote, because through the process of packing and cracking, you can change a district to discount particular people's votes. So that's about all I want to say about detailing gerrymandering per se, but I've included some URLs from some good websites that I like to look at. Of course, the League has a good one, Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, who has been working for Fair Maps for a very long time, has a great website and a good toolkit. The Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition is working with Democracy Campaign, and it's a newer grassroots organization that you might have actually worked with some of your counties that have just passed the referendums. They have been very active in promoting the referendums, helping people get that through their county boards and onto the ballots. And they are also a great partner for the People's Map Commission in that they are helping promote the People's Map Commission hearings and having people become comfortable testifying in front of the People's Maps. So you might want to check out their website. And also, if you're just looking for details on, you know, how did gerrymandering mess up Wisconsin and what are the details on a district level, you can always go to the Gill versus Whitford case, and on the Wisconsin Legislative Bureau site, there's a nice long document where you can look at that. Wisconsin's geography makes it easy to gerrymander. And the political geography, if you look at this map here, it's the state of Wisconsin and it's the electoral results from each ward from the 2016 presidential election. I know it's small and hard to see, but just look for the colors. If you can see, all the red are wards that voted Republican and the blue are wards that voted Democratic. You can see La Crosse here, you're a pretty Democratic area in general. I'm up here in Dunn County and we're kind of mixed. You know, overall, they like to say Wisconsin is a purple state. You know, overall, we vote about half Republican and half Democratic. However, it's very nested geographically how we like to vote. And so it's just interesting to stay aware of that when you think of redistricting. Other reasons why did this commission be formed? Well, one of the things is Wisconsin's rules for constitutional changes require a legislative action as opposed to a citizen's initiative. So if we want to change from, in our constitution, the maps are set by the legislators and voted in on them. If we want to change that, we have to have legislative action to have a change in our constitution. Whereas Michigan, they had that citizens initiative last year that created their redistricting commission that's in their first year of doing this now. Redistricting bills have been proposed in front of the state Congress and Assembly year after year after year, and they haven't gone anywhere. Sometimes they don't even get a reading. So there's just been in action legislatively to take up this topic. We can see from the all the referendum that have been passed, 55 counties have passed fair map resolutions by anywhere from 65 to 75% of the people in that county want to have a fair maps redistricting process. So there is bipartisan public support. So what do? The people are saying they want it. In this last November election, 15 counties, municipalities had it on our ballots, and they all voted for every single time. So, but legislature isn't listening. So Governor Evers formed the People's Map Commission with an executive order and the application for people that wanted to apply to be on this was set out in July. And the thing to remember, this is just an advisory board. You know, we have no authority actually, but it's the best. It's a step in the right direction. One of the things that I thought is kind of interesting is, like, why do we need a People's Map Commission of some sort? Is we all know that the maps have gone through the courts almost every census. So just going back to, this might be a little hard to read. I'll just walk you through the pertinent points. In 1961, the census comes out. It's done in, say, 1960. The census data should be done at the end of that year and then be given to the legislators and the states at the beginning of the next year for apportionment to see how many representatives you're going to have in the state house. And also then each state needs to do their own redistricting. And in our Constitution, we are supposed to have this maps done by our legislators within the first session after the census data is available. Okay, so that's kind of a, not quite a firm timeline, but you'd expect them to start coming in the around 1961 is when the map making would be started. So interestingly, in 1961, there was a legislative council that was bipartisan. It had both Democrat and Republican senators as part of it, and they drew the maps, which once those maps were handed over to the legislators to agree and enact, they could get no agreement. So they went through 3 rounds of this, and the governor vetoes until finally the Wisconsin Supreme Court had to get involved and do the maps. And this timeline is, you know, this is about 10 years from here to here. So you can see it took a considerable amount of time to get those maps enacted. And then going back to what we were talking about a little bit more about delays in the census, one of the ways this kind of screws everything up is that our assembly people are elected every 2 years, right? So we just had a round here in 2020. The next round is going to be 2022. Anybody that wants to run for assembly really wants to know where their district lines are. What if they change? What assembly am I supposed to be running in? They're going to need that by January of the year that the election is. So you want to get it done relatively quickly to keep things going smoothly. 1971 was the last census that the legislators actually got together, made maps, pushed them through, and it was agreed upon. The governor did call a special session to get it done, but it got done. But in 1981, they couldn't get any agreement, and finally it went to the district courts to issue maps. So all these delays, but it's also expensive as well. The city or the state of Wisconsin is paying for all this business in the courts. Then after that, they even had to do an amendment, and the legislators had to agree upon that. So in 1991, the legislators were able to agree on maps, but the governor vetoed it, and eventually that as well had to go to the district court to finalize the maps. But at least that didn't have quite as long of a timeline. It's the only good thing to say about that one. In 2000, again, there was no agreement in the legislators, and it went to the district courts to issue the maps. So then we come along to 2011, and this happened very quickly. The legislators issued maps by July, the year that the census data was there. And as you probably are aware, this happened in the dark with just the Republicans in a law office, and it was a very non-transparent process. But the maps came out very quickly. They did have to go to court to do a redo of the maps, kind of as like a voting rights issue that had to be rectified. But then even though those maps were agreed upon, they were challenged in the district court. I'm sure this is the Whitver case that we're all familiar with, and it was appealed to the Supreme Court. So this is the history of what happens here, and it also, I think, really informs us on that we really need to make a change so that we don't have to keep going back to the courts, unless we always want the courts to continue forever and ever to do our maps for us. So this is the People's Map Commission, and this is from all our hearings are online. We're doing everything transparently. For a lot of us that none of us actually work for the state or are really familiar with how things function. So we're learning a lot. We're learning about transparency laws and how to work effectively in the public. And so it's a big learning curve. None of us are mapping experts. We were chosen based on our applications, and a review of 3 retired judges went through and picked representatives from each congressional district, and with a view that they wanted to have minorities represented as well. We have one person here is another leaguer here from Sheboygan. Melissa Prentice is a librarian, and she's on the commission. And then this is our chair, Chris Ford, who is an emergency room physician from Milwaukee, and he represents us very well. So what's the charge for the People's Map Commission? It's basically to prepare 3 sets of maps: congressional, state senate, and state assembly. And we do this by listening to the public to draw maps that fairly and accurately represent Wisconsin. It will be a transparent process, so everyone understands why the lines were drawn, what decisions were, what were in people's minds when they made those decisions. And also to learn from experts to fully understand the options for Wisconsin. And the governor's office has got a number of wonderful experts that we've been learning from. So again, with the maps to be drawn, the idea is to reapportion the total population into equal groups so that there's equal representation. Congressional districts must have equal population, and those numbers are usually pretty exact from each congressional district. State districts usually should have the same amount of people, but there's a little bit more leniency, and the deviations are usually like 1% from one state district to the other. Under our last Redistricting Act, number 43 in 2011, they set up, there's 33 Senate districts and 99 assemblies. So each assembly there's 3 assembly districts nested within each Senate district. And does it make a difference? Do they change much for year to year? And this is just an example of the congressional districts. Here's us, Congressional District 3. This was at the beginning of 2000s, and then this is the last one. So you can see that there's quite a bit of change in pulling down the 7th congressional district into the middle of the state, and changes around north of Madison-Dane County. And this is the current assembly district. This is really busy. I just am doing this maybe more for effect so that you can see the complexity in these districts. These are the districts that are overlaid within the counties. So what is our process? Our process is to hold 8 hearings, 1 in each congressional district, study, evaluate, and determine the criteria that we want to use for drawing the maps, the process for the map drawing, including what software you're going to use, what data sets are we going to use, and then how are we going to measure the effectiveness of what we were trying to do afterwards on the maps. And also, very importantly, is to develop a report to include recommendations for a map drawing process. So we are advisory. Once this is over and done with, what we're hoping is that this will be a template or a blueprint someday for a nonpartisan committee to take up this process over. So what are the criteria for the maps? Per Act 66, which is the Governor's Act that created it, we must be free from partisan bias and partisan advantage, avoid diluting or diminishing minority votes, including the practice of cracking and packing. We need to, of course, comply with the Voting Rights Act's requirements, which is a federal requirement. Wisconsin, we're not. Those mainly apply to the areas around Milwaukee. The rest of the state isn't too impacted by Voting Rights Acts. We want the maps to be compact, which it means it's concentrated over a limited area rather, really long, stretched out kind of area. You want them contiguous so that all the parts are connected and that can be reached without crossing district lines. You want to avoid splitting any wards or municipalities so that everybody in a similar geographic area has the same representatives that they can communicate with. And then maintain traditional communities of interest. And this is an area that the commission is really kind of grappling with is, what is a community of interest? That it's an area that has a recognized similarity of interest, maybe a racial, ethnic, some economic group, a geographical group. So you want to make sure that these communities can have fair representation within the state. One can imagine that, maybe if there's a small group of organic farmers somewhere that had a lot of commonalities in the rules that they needed to keep their organic farming safe, that they might be a community of interest. The ways that you learn about this is really by communicating with the people. So it's really important that we're hearing from the people during the commission to recognize what these communities of interest are. We need to evaluate the data sets that we're going to use in the mapping. Well, of course, we get the census and the census block data, but we also, some people look at, just the registered voters because the census data is everybody and our representatives represent everybody, but there's ways that you can look at just the registered voters to sway how you want to connect the dots and chop up the districts. Political affiliation, partisan gerrymandering, previous election results, should those even be used in the mapping process? The Iowa plan doesn't use them, but then there's some of our experts are saying, yeah, maybe after you draw the lines, you want to go back and see what you've done. You need to understand what you've done and just not be blind to it. So when do you use this data? When do you turn it on or turn it off? And we all, as a commission, by consensus, have to agree to a process. We are trying to find out, how are we going to evaluate fairness? That's what we're there to do, is to get fair maps. Partisan asymmetry is really one of the problems, right? And you want to know whether both parties receive an equal opportunity to capture a given number of seats if they receive a comparable statewide vote. So that's the asymmetry. And what we've seen in 2018, this little diagram here, the state assembly popular vote across the state Dems had 1.3 million and Republicans had 1.1 million votes. However, if you look at the assembly seats that were won, the Democrats only captured 36, which is 36%, because there's 99, yeah, 36% of the seats, but they had 54% of the votes. So why is this asymmetry happening? One way to look at that is the efficiency gap, and this is a metric that can be calculated that looks at wasted votes. These are votes that didn't really contribute to somebody's win. You can read about that in the Whitford case. That was one of the metrics that they used to determine gerrymandering. Also, you want to be able to evaluate if your maps would be responsive, whether there's shifts in voters' allegiances actually change the representation. Are they dynamic? And then also there's the concept of competitiveness. How many districts are close to a 50% vote for either party? And this is something that we hear a lot, in some of the states actually even have it in their mapping process, that there has to be so many districts that are competitive. And of course you want that. But if you look at a state like ours, and we can look at all those districts, in a way, you could almost, like, it would be another form of gerrymandering to impose a competitive district in a county that typically always votes Republican. And so you don't want to get involved in any sort of kind of reverse kind of gerrymandering while you're trying to solve a problem. So that's another topic that we've been discussing, that we need to figure out how we're going to deal with that criteria. These are the expert presentations we've had to date. 3 of them, October 1st, Ruth Greenwood was very interesting. All these are online, by the way. You can go to the website and look at them. They're all on YouTube. And she was involved in the Whitford case as well, as a lawyer. So she gave us a lot of good information on gerrymandering in itself. The following meeting, Ken Meyer and Keith Gaddy, who are both involved in the 2011 redistricting, gave us suggestions for nonpartisan districting, and even some details like, how do you start to draw your maps? Do you start it in one corner and kind of go up? And if you start in one corner versus another, it's going to change how your map, your lines are drawn. Ken represented the Democrats and Keith represented the Republicans in that redistricting cycle. So it was very interesting to get both their insights on the process. And most recently, we heard from some math professors on the mathematics of some of the metrics, and even just evaluating your maps after you've completed them. What are the lessons that we've learned to date? First, with map drawing, the very first things you have to do is accommodate the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act requirements for equal population and minority protection. So that's your baseline with mapping. And then all the various criteria we talked about, we were hoping that maybe you could just prioritize them and just kind of feed data and go through and have the district lines fall out based on that criteria. But what we're learning is that no, that's not really going to work, because you can't really prioritize all those district lines. I mean, each area is different, compact, contiguous. What if you got a river going right through, or a county line going right through a city? You need to have some sort of iterative process, and it needs human input. And we all thought, with weird shapes, look at these weird shapes, that's gerrymandering, that's bad, bad, bad. And in many cases it is, but you can't always see it that way. One example they shared with us was in Chicago. If you just look outside the boundaries of Chicago, there's a weird district that looks like a big U around it. And that is actually one of the communities of interest. They did that intentionally to unite an African American and Latinos population on either side of that border of the city of Chicago, so that they would have better representation and their voice wouldn't be diluted by everybody else. So that's a strong lesson we all learned. And communities of interest, again, it's like the people need to define that. And I think it's important to have everyone's voice be heard. The testimony, so we have, the way these commission meetings go is we have our experts, the commission does a Q&A for a while and ask questions, and then the testimony for each, it's usually by each congressional district, but you can give testimony at any time, regardless of your CD that you're in, and each person has 3 minutes to talk. And so what we've got a tracker, we're keeping track of all this information. And what we learn is that gerrymandering is a huge concern, of course, and what it leads to: non-responsive representation. A 3-time senator talked about the polarization in the legislators that is due to gerrymandering, that you get candidates in there that are more extreme within the views of their party, and you don't get so many middle of the road people. So it's really hard to get the work done in the legislature. And boy, we've heard time and time again, people feel that their legislators don't listen. I mean, I guess they feel that legislators are in a safe seat and that they don't need to listen, is the viewpoint of the people giving testimony. And we've also seen many non-competitive districts and uncontested races. People don't even want to run if they don't feel like they have a fair chance of winning. Communities of interest, there's some lakeshore groups that cross districts right now that would like to be considered as a community of interest, because they share the common problems of what's happening along the lakefronts and water quality. The watersheds, we heard from that with this last congressional district meeting about trying to protect our watershed, especially in the Red Cedar up here, where there's been a lot of problem with pollution from farming and boating and lots of different causes, but a lot of people trying to solve it from a diverse geographic area. So the community suggestions on fixing the problem, the Iowa plan is the most common one that is brought up because it is nonpartisan and they don't use previous voting data. In Iowa, they've been using it for a number of cycles, and they don't have to go to court to get their maps approved. The legislators and everyone buys in on them, and it's a relatively smooth process. Some people had suggested we use an algorithm without human influence. That negates really communities of interest, so that's kind of a hard suggestion to move forward with. And we heard a lot about keeping counties intact as well as municipalities. And just to give an example of how that might be very important in the area that we're all in, here is my county here. I live in Dunn County. This is the assembly districts. The colors change with each assembly district. So you can see in Dunn County, there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 different districts that are represented in our county. So the Board of Supervisors testified and said that it's really hard when you want to communicate with your assembly people. For one county, they have to deal with 4 different assembly people, and to get them to listen to you when you're just a small, maybe a portion of their geographic area, is also a challenge. St. Croix County is in the same position with having 4 different assembly districts. And in your area closer here with Monroe, you have 3 different districts. So that's a message that the commission has heard, and we're definitely going to be aware of the problem with the counties. So the expert presentations coming up, this is hot off the press. These dates just came out yesterday from the governor's office. So our next meeting is going to be January 14th for the 4th CD. And you can see the rest of the dates here. And again, written comments are accepted anytime. If you go onto this URL from the People's Map Commission and put in your thoughts, they would be most welcome. And our CD has we had our hearing already, but please feel free to sign up for testimony on any of these dates. If you feel like you want to increase your comfort level, you can always go to the Wisconsin Fair Maps, and they will kind of help prepare you your testimony. So what for the support, what we need, like I said, is public testimony. And then we don't know, because we're advisory, we would like our maps to be ready when the state is ready. So the whole point of this is kind of, once the legislators prepared their maps, we have what we feel is a nonpartisan map that the people have helped create to bounce off. Now that's really hard to set a timeline when we don't even know when the census data is going to be available, and then we don't know how quickly the legislators will create the maps, but I assume based on last time they will do it quite quickly. So what this is, I'm speaking more on behalf of myself as a commissioner than the commissioner at this point, but we know that we need transparency, and at some point, oh, this didn't advance, hold on, oops, sorry. I want to make sure that what we would love to get to a point where we can share our maps quickly and get quick turnaround from the communities to find out, you know, their opinions on what we've done or haven't done. So that's all to be determined. And I think it was Ellen who said, you know, it never ends. You know, the latest challenge was just at the end of a couple of weeks ago. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty petitioned the Wisconsin Supreme Court, anticipating that the redistricting maps will go to court, say, let's not go to the lower courts, let's just go directly to the Supreme Court. But by doing that, and bypassing the lower courts, you don't get all that discovery and the public information. And also they directly, in this rule change they propose, is that it would only be the partisan groups and the governor that could approach the Supreme Court. So it takes out all the nonpartisan groups like the League of Women Voters, like our commission. So they had asked for comments, you know, right before, during Thanksgiving, right? So people did submit their comments, and there will be a public hearing in January. So we'll see where that rule change goes. So thank you all for listening and, you know, being concerned about redistricting. It's kind of a dry subject, but it certainly is an important one.
Well, Anne Marie, thank you. We do have a couple questions. One of the questions is if whether or not Iowa is considered a swing state like Wisconsin is, and if not, would it work for our maps to be drawn similarly to theirs? Does it make a difference in terms of, you know, how evenly divided the state is, I guess?
That's a really good question. And I am not sure about how the political geography of Iowa, what it's laid out. We have requested someone from the Iowa Commission to present in front of our commission so that we can learn more about the details of exactly how it's done. Because that's, each state is a little unique in its own rules. So what might work beautifully in one state might need to be tweaked or changed to work in another.
And then I have another question, and that has to do with whether or not a state constitutional amendment would be needed to provide Wisconsin with the option for citizen initiatives. And if you know if any groups are promoting that type of concept or that process.
Well, yeah, yes, there would need to be a change in the state constitution to do that. As far as allowing citizens initiatives, I'm not sure about, I'm not aware of any particular move to do that.
So I would ask that's the end of the questions that I have. If anybody else has any, you could type it in now. Otherwise, we will go ahead and thank you so much for that information. I'm going to highlight our wonderful president, Mary Nugent, for her comments. Thanks.
Okay, hi. Let's see. Anne Marie, could you stop sharing, please? All right, there we go. There we go. Thank you. So thank you so much, Ellen, Robin, Jane, Anne Marie, for giving us so much information on a topic that that will certainly affect each and every one of us. So everyone, please keep contacting your legislators on the need for fair maps and watch for action alerts regarding this subject. We have 3,000 league members in the state. Imagine the impact that we could have if each one of us makes our voice heard. So thank you everyone for attending our webinar on census and redistricting. If you have any further questions or comments, please send them to our Gmail. And please check out our website along with our Twitter and our Facebook and Instagram accounts. And finally, stay well, stay involved, and have the happiest of holidays, no matter what form they take. Goodbye, and see you next year for a look at Democracy Found and the revigoration of our democracy through Final Five voting. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Anne Marie, did you want to talk to us about anything afterwards, or why don't you be in contact with us and we had talk about?
And we can talk more about just the league stuff, yeah, on the phone.
Okay. This
That'd
was
be good.
really interesting. I really enjoyed it. So learned a lot again. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well,
Bye.
thank you for accepting. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.